Hey, Mike here with Canadian Musician. Here at the 2016-2017 season preview for the CBC at the CBC headquarters here in Toronto. It's a real privilege and honor to have Susan Marjetti, Executive Director of Radio and Audio here at the CBC with me. Of course, we at Canadian Musician recently partnered with the CBC on the Searchlight contest. We had curated the Career Booster package that went to Desiree Dawson, the winner from British Columbia of CBC Searchlight. But Susan, first of all, I know it's a very, very busy day. Just thank you so much for making the time.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your interest.
And, well, let's start with the Searchlight, since we kind of got talking about it a bit before I pressed record here. But how did you feel the contest went from the CBC's perspective? Did it do what you hoped it would for the CBC, but also for the artists?
It was amazing. So we had over 2,000 entries. It came down to 4 finalists on Sunday night, CBC Television. And thank you for your partnership, Canadian Musician. So on Sunday night, we saw the 4 duke it out, and Desiree Dawson would be the overall winner. I think why Searchlight is so important to us as the public broadcaster is that we want to continue to identify and find and develop and nurture new talent. What better way than to have a contest that seeks out new acts, right? So for us, it's part of our mandate to be a cultural leader, and that is literally right in our mandate, that we will contribute to the free flow expression of culture in Canada, that we will be our cultural voice for Canada, and so to watch Desiree, win on Sunday night was an absolute pleasure, because that contest is the epitome of what we're trying to do as a public broadcaster, and in particular in CBC Music.
Absolutely. I thought if you even just look at those final 4, it was a real kind of microcosm of what the CBC is musically, the regional talent, the ethnic talent, and most importantly, the musical talent, the diversity of it across a number of styles. I guess for the CBC, like, you guys have a very different mandate, obviously, than any other media outlet in Canada. So does that change, or does that evolve as far as what you see your role as, specifically when it comes to Canadian music?
Well, I mean, our mission is to connect, reflect, and engage a nation. And as I like to add to that, one story, one song, one person, one event at a time. And so for me, music is like the soul of our cities. For 15 years, I was the senior managing director of CBC Toronto in the Ontario region. And we played music on all of our local shows that helped reflect and connect our communities. Well, that's true at a national level as well. So at a national level, for CBC Music, which is Radio 2, Radio 3, Sirius Satellite, we also have 50 online streams, and I want to tell you about that in a second, actually, because we're doing some work there. But, for us, every opportunity is an opportunity to truly connect and reflect Canada through music. And music is a part of who we are as a people. Music tells our story. Music, to me, is our heritage. It's our modern day history, right? So it's a really important role to play, and Canadian music for us, it isn't a regulation, it's a passion, and we play more Canadian music than anyone. And we will continue to find new talent, to profile artists, and to celebrate who we are through music.
And the fact that you play more Canadian music than anybody is actually very apparent. If you just look at the SOCAN royalty reports, just CBC Radio alone, I believe in the last fiscal year that they had released a report for, just CBC Radio had paid, I think it's somewhere in the realm of $14 million to SOCAN, which it then distributes to its publisher and songwriter members. And that's a very significant chunk, and that even itself is just a small bit of what the CBC does for the music industry in Canada. But how's the CBC balance, or do you guys even look at it this way, as balancing helping musicians, Canadian musicians, and the Canadian music industry, while also just giving general fans what they want? Do you preference one over the other? Well,
I mean, you can have both. They're not mutually exclusive. Yeah. So take Town Power in the Morning on CBC Radio 2. That show has increased its audience by 48% overall, and it's up 141% with 35 to 49.
Really?
Yeah, just in the last 6 months.
That's amazing.
So, can you reflect the country? Can you be predominantly Canadian in your music choices? Can you be multi-genre? And is there an audience for that? Yes, there is.
Heather Conway had said during her brief presentation, she had made mention of that, not specifically to Tom Power's show in the morning, but across the board, that CBC Radio was one of the few terrestrial radio networks whose ratings are going up, and are especially going up among the, millennial generation. I guess, what's the reason before that? It seems counterintuitive when you look at the trends across radio broadly. How is the CBC doing that?
You know what? That's being studied internationally. Seriously, next week I'll be in Norway. A few weeks ago I was in Paris. We're telling our story all over the world because all our businesses are changing, all our industries are changing, radio is changing, public and commercial, and people are fascinated with how is CBC Radio doing so well? How is it managing to continue to grow when overall there are fewer people actually turning on a radio? And, we're doing it by a number of things. One of the ways is to embrace the diversity of this country. Another one of those ways is to, be Canada's preeminent storyteller in terms of Canadian stories. And another way is to reflect that in our music, arts, and entertainment programming. But I'll be in Norway next week, and my entire presentation will be on relevance. That's what it's on, relevance. And in a world, where audiences are changing in terms of the demographic makeup, and that's as much true in Europe, in Australia, all over the world where we've spoken, that's as true there as it is here. So where the demographic makeup is changing, as well as the digital online, creating, new ways for people to enjoy content, to engage with content. It's those two things, and it's why when I first took the job, one of the first things I started to talk about with my teams was the need to live and play in a digital and diverse world, because we do. So my whole presentation is on relevance. It's on reflecting the diversity. It's about making choices that are more relevant to a broader cross-section of people, because if you think about it, you can choose this group or this group or this group, but if you're the public broadcaster, you really have to respectfully reach as broad a cross-section as possible as the public broadcaster. You put the public into your content. So I do think that there's a unique role to play for CBC in both Canadian music and in terms of our journalism.
Speaking of that role as a public broadcaster, it's prior to our partnership with the CBC on the Searchlight contest, and I believe we're also partnering with you on the upcoming musical, I forget what the actual title of it is, but the Classrooms contest, best music class in Canada contest. Yeah. And but prior to all that, during the summer, prior to the last federal election, we just in the office at Canadian Musician had started a petition, not really to influence the election, because that would be I guess probably beyond our abilities, but more generally speaking, to start a conversation within the Canadian music industry and among music fans and among musicians about the role that the CBC plays, the vital role that it plays within the Canadian music industry, because it's the only platform or the only media outlet that has the cross-Canada platform to provide exposure to up-and-coming musicians, to provide nationally broadcast interviews with up-and-coming musicians, to hold an all-CanCon music festival such as next weekend's CBC Music Festival. Overwhelmingly, the support, we receive positive support for that initiative and within that conversation, but you're always going to get some backlash of people saying, either privatize the CBC, there's no need for it in the media landscape, or the CBC should just stick to music. What's it doing in entertainment, or should just stick to news, what's it doing in entertainment and music? I know we have our strongly held beliefs and reasonings for why we started that conversation and support the CBC, but I guess what's the main argument that you would put out there as far as when people say CBC should stick to what it does best, news, and get out of entertainment and music and leave that to the for-profit companies? companies. You touched on it a bit there, but essentially, what is the CBC's role, or what's the argument to be made as far as why it should be playing the role that it does?
Well, I think CBC is a journalistic leader. It's our mandate and it's our passion to also be a cultural leader. I mean, why was the CBC created? It was created because of the American content, the influx of the proliferation of American content, across our borders and across our land. And so it was created to actually build a culture, literally. Is there still a vibrant and vital role today? Well, I'll tell you, even when I was doing talk shows, I always made music part of the fabric of the talk shows. And people would say, well, I don't understand, this is a talk show. Why are we playing music on a talk show? Because if you, in that instance, if it's a local talk show, want to connect and reflect your community, music's the soul of the community. It's the heart and soul of your community. It reflects who we are as a people. So now, if you're a public broadcaster with a national audience and a national reach, you need music to be part of the palette of colors from which you paint, to truly reflect who we are as people. I think it's absolutely vital. And as I say, it's written right into our mandate, the free flow of cultural expression, and that CBC will continue to be a leader in Canadian culture.
Since then, obviously, the federal government has released its most recent budget, or the new government's first budget. It actually went above and beyond what we were hoping for in the petition, which many people were, which was to reverse the 2012 budget cuts under the previous Conservative government. I believe it's $675 million, if I remember correctly, over 5 years in additional funding is coming to the CBC. Do you know yet what that means specifically for the CBC, as far as what new initiatives, or where essentially just where that money is going, and is there anything specific to CBC's coverage of music that people can expect?
I think CBC's been working on and part of the digital thrust for a number of years now, and without a doubt, new monies will go toward continuing to enrich and enhance our digital offer. For CBC Music in particular, we're reinvesting in live music recording. It was a pleasure to announce that at Canadian Music Week. It's going to be, as you pointed out, multi-genre, a variety of music, contemporary music, a place for discovery, but we're going to put our money into identifying, developing, and celebrating new artists in this country. So that is one of the ways that we're going to use that money. We're also revamping our cbcmusic.ca, over 50 music streams. We're revamping that offer. It looks really good. It's easier to use. You'll have an ability to, be curated, great music content, hundreds and hundreds of artist profiles that people will have access to, our ongoing features on our music scene and industry, as well as great music. And you'll be able to, it's called semi-interactive, you'll be able to skip if you're listening to something that breaks the tone or your mood. So it's a new element that we're bringing to our offer. Now, that's later in June, and those are just some of the ways that CBC Music and CBC as a service is continuing to push ahead in both a digital realm, and always music is a core part of that.
One thing, I'm not sure if you would even be in a position to comment on this truthfully, but you mentioned how the new CBC will be semi-interactive, which would mean it falls under the Tariff 8 decision that Resound is currently appealing from the Copyright Board of Canada, which sets I guess what many in the industry see as a very unreasonably low rate for streaming royalties from non-interactive and semi-interactive streaming services. Having I guess a ball in that game, or however you want to put it, through the CBC Music Service, does CBC have a position, being a institution that's in the public good and wants to support the music industry, but also having, standing to benefit financially from lower rates because it means you have to pay out less? Essentially, do you guys have a stance on that decision? Do you think it was the right call, or would you you have liked to see it higher, or are you agnostic about it?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we have to be to serve our audience and to truly reflect this country, we have to be there. Streaming, 73% of Canadians listen to radio. 16% stream. But we know that streaming is growing. And we know that in general, not CBC, it's Radio 1 and Radio 2 are actually bucking the trend and growing audience. But we know that overall, streaming and digital is where we have to reach people if we're going to share the Canadian music experience. I can't go too deep into this, but we are in negotiations now around music rights. And I think as, the public broadcaster, we pay respectable rates. I have a friend, Carla Palmer, who works in our communications department, who is constantly reminding me, as someone very deeply connected in the music community, that CBC pays artists. We put money in artists' pockets, and that is a bit of an anomaly. It shouldn't be, but in this day and age. So we stand by the fact that we're in the streaming business, of course. We want to share great Canadian music, and we want to do it in ways that our audience is asking for.
And getting close to the end here, but another recent development that's come out of the new, relatively new at this point, Liberal government, was the announcement from Minister of Culture and Heritage, Melanie Joly, saying there's going to be a full-scale, widespread review of essentially all federal policies on broadcasting and the arts. That means CanCon regulations, the CBC's mandate, the Broadcasting Act. It's the first time since '91 that such a review will have taken place, and obviously the world is a whole lot different than it was back in 1991. I guess from your perspective, it's far too early to comment on anything that's going to come out of that, but more just as far as hopes or concerns. What would you like to see changed, or what would you like to see come out of this review, and are there any concerns about what you think may come out of the review?
No, CBC welcomes, when you turn to Canadians and you ask Canadians for input, and our mandate was last updated in 1991, so to look at what we do and what Canadians need, and to look at our industry overall and how it's changing is critical. So we welcome all input.
But is there anything that you're looking at right now, saying whether it's CanCon regulations, whether it's how CanCon can be applied to the streaming world? Because I know that's a major debate within the music industry now, whether it can or should apply to the world of streaming. Is there anything that you see that you want to, either you personally or the CBC as a corporation, wants to bring to this conversation that's going to be taking place and saying these are the changes that need to happen, or this is at least what we should be looking at?
No, we'll be looking for that input into and that direction that is gained and gathered from that. Look, whether we have, and I think regulations for CanCon have done considerable good in this country, no doubt about it. But whatever the targets are, or whether there are targets, we're going to continue to exceed on that front, again, because that is our reason for being, is to truly be Canadian and to reflect this country, and music's a key part of that. So regardless of whether, for example, there are changes, we're going to continue on radio, on TV, on digital, social media, on mobile, to continue to push ahead.
Well, again, I'm not sure how long we've got, but it feels like it's been a long conversation. I know that you have probably a whole lot more lined up today. But again, this has been Susan Marjetti, Executive Director of Radio and Audio at the CBC. And Susan, just thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.